Guys, welcome to my Amazon AWS class. This is Shrikant Edam. Today we are going to discuss about auto scaling part 2 topic. Okay, here we will understand how auto scaling will balance the EC2 between availability zones, how it attaches the EC2 and deattaches it. So we understood like auto scaling does balancing of EC2 between availability zones, right? And load balancer will share the load between the EC2 which are present in availability zone. So here we are going to use small terms ASG, which stands for auto scaling group, AS auto scaling, AZ means availability zone. If auto scaling finds that the number of EC2 instances launched by auto scaling group into subject availability zone is not balanced, auto scaling will do rebalancing activity by itself. Auto scaling always try to balance the instances distribution across availability zone. So this is auto scaling group, guys. Okay, in this auto scaling group I have 3 regions configured. In these 3 regions I have instances present, but they are not balanced. So there are total 6 instances, but in availability zone 1 I have 2, in the second one I have 1, and in the third availability zone I have 3. So they are not balanced. So what auto scaling will does is it will check the instances and it will distribute the instances correctly. So this is the balanced one. So this is before auto scaling group. Once auto scaling balances the EC2, it will be shown like this. While rebalancing, auto scaling group launches new EC2 instances where there are less EC2 at present, and they terminate the instances from the availability zone that add more instances. So what auto scaling group will do is first it will create new instances. Okay, before terminating any instance it will create a new instance. Okay, then it will terminate the existing instance. This is what I explained. While rebalancing, auto scaling group launches new EC2 instances where there are less EC2 at present, and they terminate the instance from the availability zone that add more instances. For example, if you see this picture, here we have more instances, right? So before terminating the extra instance, it will create instance first here, because here it is less. Okay, once the instance is created, then it will remove the extra instance, then it will do the rebalancing. So in auto scaling also sometimes we face imbalance. When we will face this imbalance, if we add or remove some subnet availability zone from auto scaling group. So in case if you are removing any auto availability zone from the auto scaling group, for some time user will face imbalance. Okay, so auto scaling group will take some time to balance the EC2 instances between the availability zone. If we manually request for EC2 termination from our auto scaling group, in case if you find any more instances in the availability zone, or in case if you don't want any EC2 to be present and you manually request for the termination of EC2, then also we will face imbalance. An availability zone that did not have enough EC2 capacity and it reached maximum capacity, then we will face imbalance issue. So in this case, if one availability zone has more EC2 instances, okay, and it reached its maximum capacity, then also like we will face imbalance issues. So here we can attach a running EC2 instance to an auto scaling group by using command line or console, but it needs to meet this following requirement. Instances must be in running state, not terminated or stopped. So whatever the EC2 instance you are trying to run, it needs to be in running state. We need to make sure it is not terminated or in stopped state. AMI used to launch the EC2 still exist. You will create EC2, right, using the AMI image, so that AMI image need to be present. instance is not part of another auto scaling group. So we need to make sure the instance is not part of any other auto scaling group. You can configure one instance to one auto scaling group. Instance should present in the same availability zone of the same auto scaling group which is attached to auto scaling group. You cannot add other region subnet EC2. So in this picture we can understand. So this is my auto scaling group and this is my availability zone. So the auto scaling group this EC2 and the auto scaling group needs to be present in the same region. Okay, you cannot add EC2 or auto scaling group of other region to the existing region. So we need to make sure they both are present in the same region, then only it will work. If the existing EC2 instance under the auto scaling group plus to be need exceed the max capacity of the auto scaling group, the request will fail. EC2 instance will not be added. So in the, when we configure auto scaling group, we will configure the maximum instances to be launched, right? So once it exceeds the maximum capacity and if auto scaling group is requesting one more EC2, then it will fail. EC2 will not be added. You can manually remove EC2 instance from an auto scaling group using command line or console. So you can manually remove the EC2 instance using the command line or from the console. You can then manage the detached instances independently or attach it another auto scaling group. So whatever the EC2 instance you are removing from the ASG auto scaling group, you can use it independently, okay, or else you can add it to another auto scaling group. When you detach an instance, you have the option to decrease the auto scaling group desired capacity. Okay, when we create a auto scaling group, there also we mentioned desired capacity. It means how many instances you want to run at the time. So in case if you are deleting any instance, there you have to mention like do you want to decrease the desired capacity or not. In case if you don't mention it, what auto scaling will think is the instance is deleted terminated automatically, so it is going to launch the new instance again. In order to avoid that, you can decrease the desired capacity. The same thing mentioned here. Example, desired capacity is configured to 8. For example, if you don't define it, auto scaling will create one more instance to meet the desired capacity. If you do not have the auto scaling group, will launch, if you don't mention it, auto scaling group will launch another instance to replace the one which you have detached. Okay, when you delete auto scaling group, its parameter like maximum, minimum and desired capacity are all set to 0, hence whatever the instances are running in the background, they will be terminated. So without deleting the instance, if you delete the auto scaling group directly, so whatever the instances running in the background and all the settings will be deleted and the instances will get terminated. So in order to avoid that, what we have to do is first we have to detach the EC2 instances. If you want to keep the EC2 instances, manage them independently, you can manually detach them first, then delete the auto scaling group. Okay, this is a best practice. We can attach one or more elastic load balancer to auto scaling group. So to your in your auto scaling group, you can have more than one elastic load balancer. The elastic load balancer must be in the same region as the auto scaling group. That's right, auto scaling group and elastic load balancer needs to be present in the same region. You cannot add different region auto scaling group or elastic load balancer. Once you do this, any EC2 instance existing or added by the auto scaling group will be automatically registered with the auto scaling group defined by elastic load balancer. So once you add the load balancer, any EC2 which is existing old one or any EC2 instance which is launched by auto scaling group will automatically be registered. You do not need to register those instances manually on the auto scaling group, which are defined by elastic load balancer. Instances and the elastic load balancer must be present in the same VPC. So here we understood, right, the auto scaling group and load balancer should be present in the same region, but regarding the EC2 instances and elastic load balancer, they need to be present in the same VPC. Okay. So how auto scaling performs or load balancer performs health check on EC2? By default, auto scaling uses EC2 status check only to determine if the EC2 is in healthy state or unhealthy state. So when auto scaling launch a EC2 instance, it is going to EC2 going to perform status check, right, 2 by 2. So once it is done, so auto scaling going to use that status report to determine if the EC2 is in healthy or not healthy state. If auto scaling if EC2 shows a non-healthy state, it is going to terminate that instance. When you have one or more elastic load balancer defined with the auto scaling group, you can configure auto scaling to both the EC2 health check and the elastic load health check to determine the instance health check. So in case if you have more than one elastic load balancer, okay, you can configure the setting in the auto scaling to check the health status of the EC2 using the elastic load balancer health check or the EC2 health check. Need to consider health of EC2, okay, and load balancer and delete the unhealthy instance, or else it will not share the workload properly and cause issues. So health check will be done by load balancer and EC2, right? So here in this case, if any one of the instance is reporting unhealthy, okay, you have to delete it, you have to terminate it, or else load balancer will not share the workload with that instance and it will cause problems. So the load balancer and EC2 status check will send the report to the auto scaling group. Auto scaling will check the report and find what are the instances are present in healthy or non-healthy state. So it will keep the healthy instances and terminate the unhealthy instances. Health check grace period is 300 seconds. So when auto scaling group launch a EC2 instance, it will take minimum 5 minutes, right, to perform all the configuration settings and status check. So here you can configure the time, like how much time do you need to launch the EC2 instance. Here it is mentioned 300 seconds, which means 5 minutes. You can decrease the time or increase the time depending upon your requirement, and this process is called warm-up period. If we set 0 in grace period, the instance health check is checked once it is in service. So if we set 0 here, the health check will be done, but it will be done when the EC2 is configured with the load balancer or with the auto scaling group. Until the grace period time expires, any unhealthy status reported by the EC2 status checks or the elastic load balancer attached to the auto scaling group will not be acted upon. So once the grace period expires, any unhealthy status reported by by the EC2 status or elastic load balancer will be not worked. So what will happen after 5 minutes, after the warm-up period? Auto scaling will consider an instance unhealthy in any one of the following cases. EC2 status check report to auto scaling group and instance status other than running. So even instance is running, but EC2 status check or auto scaling group reported it as unhealthy, then it will consider it as unhealthy and it will not share the workload. and it will terminate the instance. If elastic load balancer else check are configured to be used by the auto scaling, then if the elastic load balancer report the instance as out of service, any unhealthy instances will report as out of service and they terminate the instance. Unlike availability zone, auto scaling. Just a minute. So here uh, here we have discussed, right, how auto scaling do the rebalancing between regions. First it will add the instance, then it will terminate the instance. But here load balancer, what it will do is, first it will terminate the unhealthy instance, then auto scaling will create a new instance to replace the one which is terminated. So it is in reverse. Elastic IP and EBS volume gets deattached from the terminated instances. You need to manually attach them to the new instances. So whatever the instances which got terminated, okay, it will have elastic IP and EBS volume, right? So what you have to do is you have to deattach them manually, and you can manually attach them to the new instances. So thank you for watching, guys. I believe these auto scaling details will help you to understand better. I suggest you to please make a notes, and please do subscribe, like and share it with your friends. Bye, meet you in next class.